Dawn of Deception. The holographic display aboard the TES Hyperion cast an eerie blue glow across Captain Sarah Chen's face as she studied the sensor readings for the third time. Her ship hung in high orbit above what should have been the thriving Axari colony of New Haven. Instead, the sensors showed only ruins and radiation signatures that shouldn't exist. "Run the atmospheric scan again," she ordered, her voice steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. Lieutenant Park's fingers flew across his console, but she already knew what he would find. The Axari's distinctive biosignatures, usually lighting up their sensors like a stellar nursery, were completely absent. "Ma'am," Park's voice cracked slightly. "No Axari life signs detected. Background radiation consistent with quantum dissolution weapons. They're all gone." The bridge fell silent. Quantum dissolution weapons were supposedly banned by the Galactic Concordat's Weapons Convention of 2789. The same Concordat that had assured Earth just last month that they were sending peacekeepers to protect the Axari from unnamed aggressors. Service comm unit chimed with an incoming transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Santos' hologram materialized beside her captain's chair, his usual composed expression replaced by barely contained fury. "Captain Chen, please tell me your readings are wrong." "Negative, Admiral. New Haven is gone. 2 million Axari, just, erased. And the weapon signatures." She paused, steeling herself. "They match Concordat military tech. This wasn't peacekeeping. This was extinction." The Admiral's hologram flickered as he absorbed the information. "We're getting similar reports from 3 other Axari colonies. The Concordat's claiming it was a preemptive strike against biological warfare facilities." He spat the words out like they were poison. Sarah's hand tightened on her armrest. The Axari were philosophers and artists. Their most advanced weapons were poetry and sculpture. Their greatest crime was developing medical technology that made the Concordat's pharmaceutical monopolies obsolete. "Your orders, sir." Official channels are calling for calm and diplomatic solutions. The Admiral's expression hardened. Unofficial channels are authorizing Operation Black Dawn. "You're to gather evidence, make contact with other species who've suffered similar peacekeeping, and prepare for what comes next. The Concordat just declared war on peace itself. They just don't know it yet." "Understood, sir." "And the Axari survivors. Long-range scans show a few thousand made it to their deep space archives. The Concordat doesn't know about those yet. Get to them first." Sarah nodded, already calculating jump trajectories in her head. "We'll need allies. Species who've lost colonies to mysterious aggressive elements that the Concordat needed to pacify. The Norathi lost 3 worlds last year. The Kith era lost their outer colonies to pirates that somehow had military-grade Concordat tech. Start there." The Admiral's hologram started to fade. "And Sarah, the Concordat has 5,000 years of empire behind them. We have barely 2 centuries of spaceflight. But we have something they don't." "What's that, sir?" "Nothing left to lose. They've killed our friends. Humanity doesn't forget that." Santos out. As the hologram vanished, Sarah turned to her crew. Every face on the bridge showed the same mix of horror and determination she felt in her core. "Plot a course for the Norathi Free States," she ordered, "and begin compiling all sensor data from the surface. Every radiation signature, every weapons trace, every piece of evidence. The Concordat thinks might makes right." She stood, addressing her entire bridge crew. "Let's show them what happens when they mistake humanity's patience for weakness." The Hyperion's quantum drive hummed to life, its navigation computer plotting the safest route through contested space. As they prepared to jump, Sarah studied the final image of New Haven's ruins. The Axari had a saying, "Art outlasts empires." She intended to prove them right. The Concordat had ruled through fear for 5 millennia, convincing younger species that their protection was the only thing standing between civilization and chaos. But they had made a crucial mistake. They had shown their true face not to some primitive species that would cower in fear, but to humanity. And humans had an odd habit of standing up to bullies, no matter how ancient or powerful they claimed to be. Jump drive spooled, Captain, her helmsman reported. Take us out, Sarah ordered. We have allies to gather and an empire to dismantle. The Hyperion vanished in a flash of quantum fire, leaving behind a dead world and carrying with it the seeds of revolution. The Concordat's long night was about to meet humanity's dawn, and only one would survive the encounter. Lines in the stars. The Norathi diplomatic chamber was a testament to defiance. Holographic art depicting their lost worlds floated in the air like ghostly memorials, each one a silent accusation against the Concordat's peacekeeping. Captain Chen stood before the Norathi Council, the evidence from New Haven playing behind her in stark detail. 3 of your worlds. 2 million of our allies. Sarah's voice carried across the chamber. How many more before we acknowledge the pattern? High Speaker Vorith, his crystalline form refracting the holographic light, leaned forward. The Concordat's reach is long, Captain. Their memory, longer still. The last species that dared oppose them vanished so completely that even their name is lost to history. Then we'll have to make history of our own, Sarah replied, bringing up new data streams. We've identified their weapon signatures, tracked their fleet movements. Every peacekeeping mission follows the same pattern. They target species developing technologies that could challenge their monopolies. The Norathi Council members shifted, their crystalline bodies chiming softly as they communicated among themselves. The Norathi had lost their colonies to protecting forces after developing quantum communication technology that would have made the Concordat's controlled networks obsolete. What do you propose, daughter of Earth? Voreth's voice resonated with centuries of careful diplomacy. Your species is young, your fleet small. The Concordat has more ships than your worlds have cities. Sarah smiled. They have ships. We have something better. She gestured, and a new hologram appeared. The schematics of a Concordat dreadnought. We have their overconfidence. Security analysis from Lieutenant Park. Her tactical officer stepped forward. The Concordat hasn't updated their quantum encryption in 3 centuries. They haven't needed to. No one's dared to challenge them. Their ships are powerful, but their networks are running on protocols older than human spaceflight. A murmur ran through the council. Voreth's crystalline form pulsed with interest. You've broken their codes. Better, Sarah replied. We've copied them. Every authorization, every command frequency. They're so convinced of their superiority that they use the same protocols across their entire fleet. One key opens every door. The chamber erupted in chiming sounds as the Norathi counselors communicated rapidly. Voreth raised a limb for silence. You propose to use their own networks against them. I propose we show them why humanity has survived every extinction-level event our homeworld could throw at us. Sarah's eyes blazed with conviction. We adapt, we improvise, and we never, ever forget our friends. The holographic displays shifted, showing a complex network of Concordat supply lines and command centers. The Kithera have already pledged their support. The surviving Exari are spreading the word through their deep space archives. Even now, ships from a dozen species are gathering in the shadow of the Carina Nebula. For what purpose? Voreth asked, though his resonance suggested he already knew the answer. To remind the Concordat that empire is not the natural state of the galaxy. That cooperation will always be stronger than control. Sarah brought up one final display, a tactical overlay of Concordat space. We don't need to defeat their entire fleet. We just need to prove they're not invincible. Once that happens, the fear breaks, Voreth finished, and with it, their power. He rose, his crystalline form catching the light like a prism. There will be terrible consequences if we fail, and worse ones if we don't try. Sarah gestured to the memorial holograms. How many more worlds will burn while we wait for someone else to stand up? The council chamber fell silent. Finally, Voreth spoke, his voice carrying the weight of his species' decision. "The Norathi remember our dead, Captain. We remember those who stood with us, and those who turned away." His form pulsed with determined light. "We will not turn away. The Norathi fleet stands with Earth." Sarah bowed deeply. "Together then." As she prepared to return to the Hyperion, her comm unit chimed. Lieutenant Park's voice was tight with urgency. "Captain, we're detecting Concordat ships entering the system. A lot of them." "Right on schedule," Sarah replied, catching Vorith's attention. "They've been watching us since New Haven, waiting to see who we contact first." She turned to the high speaker, ready to show them what happens when the hunted band together. Vorith's crystalline form blazed with battle light. "The Norathi have been ready for 3 centuries, Captain. Signal your fleet. Today, we teach the Concordat why even crystal can burn." The Hyperion's quantum drive spun up as Sarah transported aboard, her tactical display already showing Norathi ships rising from hidden bases across the system. The Concordat had come expecting to find one Earth ship trying to stir up trouble. Instead, they would face the combined might of 2 species with nothing left to lose. And this was just the beginning. In the shadow of the Carina Nebula, more allies were gathering, more species who had lost worlds to the Concordat's protection. The Empire's long night was about to meet its dawn, and the stars themselves would bear witness to what happened when humanity decided enough was enough. "All ships, battle stations," Sarah ordered as she took her command chair. "Show them what happens when they mistake patience for weakness." The battle for the future of the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity intended to make it one for the history books. Operation Starcross. The Concordat's Helios archive was supposed to be impenetrable, built into the core of a dying star, protected by quantum-locked shields, and a fleet of automated defenders. It had safeguarded the Empire's darkest secrets for millennia. But they had never faced a team quite like this before. Approaching thermal threshold, Lieutenant Park reported from his station aboard the Hyperion. The ship's experimental heat shielding groaned under the stellar forces pressing against it. Shield integrity at 60% and falling. Captain Chen watched the massive structure growing larger on their main display. Status of the Concordat patrols. Still chasing sensor ghosts in the outer system, her tactical officer replied with a slight smile. "The Kith-era's Phantom Fleet projectors are performing better than expected." Sarah allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Concordat's mighty warships were hunting shadows while a joint human-Norathi strike team approached their most secure facility. Sometimes the best way to beat superior technology was to think like their ancestors who had fought with sticks and stones against bigger predators. "Receiving transmission from Strike Team Obsidian," Park announced. "They're in position inside the maintenance tunnels." The strike team, led by Commander Reza Khan, had allowed themselves to be caught 3 days ago while raiding a Concordat supply line. Their ship, secretly modified with Norathi phase shift technology, had been tractored right into the archive's maintenance bay. Sometimes the best way into a fortress was through the front door. "Signal from the Norathi fleet," Park continued. "They're ready to begin their attack on the Concordat's 7th Fleet headquarters. The diversion is set." Sarah took a deep breath. Everything hinged on the next few minutes. "Send the activation signal. Tell Commander Khan he has 1 hour before we lose our window in the star's radiation field." Deep inside the archive, Commander Khan's team received their signal. The 6-person team, 3 humans and 3 Norathi, moved through maintenance shafts that hadn't seen organic life in centuries. The Concordat's reliance on automated systems had left gaps in their security that flesh and blood intuition could exploit. "Control center ahead," Khan subvocalized through their quantum-encrypted channel. "Crystalline, you're up." The Norathi engineer, whose name translated roughly to Song of Breaking Dawn, pressed against the control room's outer wall. Their crystalline body began to resonate at the exact frequency of the archive's sensor grid, creating a blind spot just large enough for the team to slip through. Inside, they found exactly what Earth's intelligence had predicted: a quantum mainframe containing the complete records of every Concordat operation for the past 1,000 years, including their true purpose for the peacekeeping missions. By the first light, one of the Norethi whispered as they began downloading data. They're not just destroying potential rivals, they're harvesting genetic data. Every species they've protected has had their genome added to some kind of database. Khan moved to another console, his expression hardening as he read. It's worse than that. They're not just collecting data. They're creating targeted bioweapons, insurance policies against any species that might challenge them, including humanity. How many species? Sarah's voice came through their comms. All of them, Captain. Every spacefaring race they've encountered. They're not maintaining peace. They're cultivating livestock. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. On the Hyperion's bridge, Sarah's tactical display lit up with new contacts. Multiple quantum signatures detected. They're dropping out of FTL inside the star's corona. A new voice cut through their communications, ancient, powerful, and furious. Did you think we wouldn't notice your primitive attempts at infiltration? That we wouldn't recognize the patterns of a species too young to know its place? Sarah's blood ran cold. The voice belonged to High Archon Vexterra, the oldest living member of the Concordat's ruling council, the mastermind behind countless peacekeeping operations. Your existence has been tolerated because you showed promise as useful servants, the Archon continued. That ends today. The human species will be noted in our archives as yet another failed experiment in allowing lesser beings to reach for the stars. Inside the archive, Khan's team faced a desperate choice. They hadn't finished downloading the full database, but Concordat forces were closing in. Captain, Khan's voice was steady despite the sound of weapon fire in the background. Request permission to initiate Protocol Zero. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. Protocol Zero wasn't supposed to be needed. It was their absolute last resort. The data, Commander. Did you get enough? Enough to prove everything. Enough to show every species in the galaxy what they really are. What they've been doing to us all. Then light it up. All ships, execute emergency quantum jump on my mark. As Concordat forces breached the control room, Khan's team activated the quantum destabilizers they had planted throughout the facility. The devices, built with combined human and Norethi technology, would tear open a subspace rift in the archive's power core. The entire facility, along with a significant portion of the star it was built into, would be pulled into a quantum singularity. The Hyperion and its support ships vanished into quantum space just as the archive began to collapse. The Archon's furious threats cut off mid-sentence as the facility, along with several pursuing Concordat ships, vanished into the artificial black hole. Hours later, in the relative safety of the Carina Nebula rally point, Sarah watched as the downloaded data was decoded and distributed to their growing alliance. The evidence was irrefutable. The Concordat hadn't been protecting peace. They had been cultivating and controlling every other species in the galaxy, preparing bioweapons to cull any that grew too powerful. Send this to every world, every colony, every ship with a quantum receiver, she ordered. The Concordat wants to talk about failed experiments. Let's show them what happens when their lab animals evolve beyond their control. The revolution wouldn't just be fought with ships and weapons now. It would be fought with the truth. And truth, once released, was harder to stop than any warship. Breaking chains. The war room aboard the Hyperion hummed with activity as representatives from 27 species coordinated the largest simultaneous attack in galactic history. The holographic display showed hundreds of ships converging on key Concordat installations across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. The Kith-era fleet is in position near the Concordat's primary shipyards, Lieutenant Park reported. Norethi strike teams have infiltrated their quantum communication hubs. The Axeri survivors have distributed the bioweapon database to every independent world in range. Sarah studied the tactical display, watching as centuries of carefully maintained fear transformed into burning rebellion. The Concordat's response had been predictably brutal. 3 more worlds had been pacified in retaliation for the Archive's destruction. But this time, their shows of force had only fueled the resistance. "Message from Admiral Santos," Park announced. "Earth fleet is ready. They say, remember New Haven." Sarah nodded grimly. "Signal all commands. Operation Prometheus begins now." Across the galaxy, the carefully laid plan unfolded. The Kithera's Phantom Fleet projectors activated simultaneously, flooding Concordat sensors with thousands of false signatures. As their automated defense systems tried to track the Phantom ships, real strike forces slipped through their supposedly impenetrable barriers. In the Carina sector, Norathi crystal ships phase-shifted through quantum shields that had stood for millennia. Their resonance weapons, designed to shatter the crystalline architecture of Concordat facilities, turned mighty fortresses into clouds of glittering dust. "Concordat forces are responding exactly as predicted," Sarah's tactical officer reported. "They're deploying their dreadnought fleets to protect their core worlds, leaving their bioweapon facilities exposed," Sarah finished. "Signal Commander Khan. His team has a green light." Deep in Concordat space, Riza Khan led a joint human-Norathi force toward a facility officially designated as a medical research station. The evidence from the archive had revealed its true purpose: manufacturing targeted plagues for any species that dared resist Concordat rule. "Multiple defensive platforms detected," Khan reported as his fleet approached, "but their response times are sluggish. The Axari virus is working." The virus, a quantum code created by surviving Axari programmers, was spreading through the Concordat's ancient but standardized networks. Every system it touched began experiencing subtle delays and errors, not enough to trigger automated alerts, but enough to give the rebellion's forces a crucial edge. "All ships, execute attack pattern Sierra," Khan ordered. "Remember, we want the facilities intact." The Concordat turned their medical knowledge into weapons. "We're going to turn those weapons back into medicine." The battle for the facility was swift and precise. Concordat defenders, accustomed to overwhelming force and absolute technological superiority, found themselves outmaneuvered by ships that should have been primitive by their standards. But humanity had brought something new to this fight: the ability to unite different species and technologies in ways the Concordat had never imagined possible. Similar scenes played out across Concordat space. Centuries of enforced peace through intimidation had left them vulnerable to an enemy that didn't play by their rules, an enemy that combined technologies in ways their rigid hierarchies had never considered. Multiple Concordat capital ships approaching through quantum space, Park warned as the Hyperion led its battle group toward the sector's command nexus. They're being led by High Archon Vexterra's personal flagship. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. "Right where we want them. Signal the Norathi. Spring the trap." As the Concordat fleet dropped out of quantum space, they found themselves surrounded not by primitive warships, but by a sphere of Norathi crystal ships. Before they could bring their quantum shields to full power, the crystal ships began to resonate. The effect was devastating. The same harmonics that had shattered their fortress walls now played havoc with their quantum shield frequencies. Ships that had survived centuries of conflict found their impenetrable defenses failing, their crystal matrix computers shattering under the sonic assault. "Incoming transmission from the High Archon's ship," Park reported. "Put it through." The ancient being's hologram appeared on the bridge, its usual composure cracking. "You primitive, ungrateful creatures. Do you understand what you're destroying? We built this peace. We maintained order while your ancestors were still learning to make fire." "You built a prison," Sarah replied calmly. "You maintained control, but you forgot something important about humans, Archon. Something even we forgot until we met the Axari, the Norathi, and all the others you tried to keep under your thumb. And what is that, you ephemeral speck? We're really good at breaking out of cages, and even better at making sure they never get built again." The Hyperion's quantum cannons fired, their beams amplified by the resonating crystal ships surrounding the Concordat fleet. The High Archon's transmission cut off as their shields collapsed completely. As the battle raged across the galaxy, the message spread from world to world, ship to ship. The Concordat was not invincible. Their technology could be matched. Their tactics could be countered. Their lies could be exposed. And most importantly, their carefully maintained divisions between species could be broken. Unity, it turned out, was more powerful than any quantum weapon. New dawn rising. The Concordat's capital world of Eternus hung in space like a jewel of crystal and light, its surface latticed with structures built over millennia of absolute rule. But today, its crystalline spires reflected the light of 1,000 ships. Not conquerors, but liberators. Status report. Captain Chen commanded from the Hyperion's bridge, watching as the combined fleet of 27 species moved into position. Concordat forces are concentrated around the central spire, Lieutenant Park reported. They've activated their planetary shield grid, but he smiled slightly. The Axari virus is already inside their systems. Shield effectiveness is down to 60% and falling. Sarah nodded, thinking of how far they'd come since discovering the massacre at New Haven. The Concordat had fought to break their spirit. Instead, they had forged an alliance that would reshape the galaxy. Message from the Norathi flagship, Park announced. High Speaker Vorith says their crystal ships are in position. They're ready to begin the resonance attack. Signal from Commander Khan's ground forces, added her tactical officer. Strike teams are in place beneath the primary shield generators. They're ready to move on your order. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of history in this moment. Open a channel to all ships. When she spoke, her voice carried to every vessel in the fleet, from the mighty Norathi crystal ships to the swift Kith-era raiders, from Earth's quantum-armed warships to the surviving Axari's automated archives. For 5,000 years, the Concordat has ruled through fear and division. They called it peace, but we know better. Peace isn't maintained by threats. It isn't protected by bioweapons and genocide. True peace comes from understanding, from cooperation, from the recognition that our differences make us stronger together than we ever could be apart. She paused, watching as more ships emerged from quantum space, vessels from species that had been neutral until now, joining the Liberation Fleet after seeing the truth about their so-called protectors. Today, we're not just fighting to end their rule. We're fighting to build something better, something they never could have imagined. A galaxy where knowledge is shared, not hoarded, where strength protects the weak instead of exploiting them, where diversity is celebrated, not controlled. On the tactical display, she could see Concordat ships moving to intercept, but their formations were fractured, their responses delayed by the Axari virus spreading through their networks. The mighty empire that had ruled for millennia was facing something their quantum computers couldn't calculate, the unpredictable power of free peoples working together. Commander Khan, you have a go. All ships, Battle Plan Omega. Show them what happens when the galaxy decides to break its chains. The battle for Eternus would be remembered for centuries to come. Norathi crystal ships resonated in perfect harmony, their frequencies matched to human quantum weapons, shattering shield generators that had stood since before Earth discovered fire. Kith-era raiders danced through the debris, their phantom projectors confusing Concordat targeting systems, while Axari automated archives broadcast the truth about their rulers to every receiving station on the planet. But the true turning point came from within. As Khan's strike teams disabled the shield generators, something unexpected happened. The crystalline towers of Eternus began to pulse with light, not the cold, controlled patterns of Concordat rule, but a wild, free rhythm that spread from spire to spire. Captain, Park's voice was incredulous. I'm detecting quantum signatures throughout the city. The buildings themselves, they're alive. Sarah leaned forward, watching in amazement as the truth revealed itself. The mighty towers of Eternus weren't just structures. They were the original crystal beings from whom the Concordat had sprung. Ancient ancestors, imprisoned in architectural form, used to power their descendants' empire. They're breaking free. Vorith's voice came through the calm, filled with wonder. After all these millennia, they choose now to awaken. The High Archon's desperate final transmission cut through all channels. You fools. We built this prison of peace to contain them. They are chaos incarnate. No, Sarah replied, watching as the ancient crystal beings rose from their architectural prisons, their light pulsing in harmony with the Norathi ships. They're not chaos. They're life. Real, messy, beautiful life. Something you forgot about long ago. The battle ended not with a devastating final strike, but with an awakening. The ancient crystal beings, freed from their millennia of forced slumber, joined with their Norathi descendants. Their combined resonance shattered not just the Concordat's weapons, but the very foundations of their power. In the days that followed, as representatives from across the galaxy gathered to build something new from the ashes of empire, Sarah stood in the reformed council chamber. The crystalline walls now pulsed with free-flowing light, a constant reminder of the change they had wrought. The Concordat ruled for 5,000 years, Admiral Santos said, standing beside her. How long do you think this new alliance will last? Sarah watched as delegates from dozens of species worked together, sharing knowledge that had been hoarded for centuries. Former enemies now collaborated on turning bioweapons into cures, on transforming war machines into tools for exploration. As long as we remember what brought us here, she replied. Not just human determination, or Norathi resonance, or Axari wisdom, or any one species' strength. We won because we learned to combine our differences into something greater than ourselves. Above them, the ancient crystal beings sang their ethereal songs, their light mixing with the stars. The long night of the Concordat's rule was over. A new dawn was rising, and with it, a chance to build the peace that force and fear had never truly achieved. In the end, humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy hadn't been their weapons or their tactics. It had been their stubborn belief that differences could be bridges instead of barriers, that unity didn't require uniformity, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to reach across the void and take another's hand. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, as if celebrating with their newfound freedom. And in the light of this new dawn, the galaxy began to heal, to grow, and to discover what it truly meant to be at peace.